Wow. I got to say, this news about Victor Wembanyama, this really got me shaken up.
Yeah.
A season-ending blood clot. I mean, are you kidding me? This guy's a generational talent.
Yeah.
And for this to happen, it's not just a blow to the Spurs, it's a blow to the whole league.
Right.
So to break this down, what this means both for Wembanyama's health and for the Spurs, we've got, our basketball expert here.
Yeah.
You've been following Wembanyama from the start. So, what are your initial thoughts? I mean, this has got to be a major setback.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who, in just his second season, was already being compared to, the greats like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett,
Hmm.
averaging over 24 points, 11 rebounds,
Yeah.
3 blocks a game. I mean, the sky was the limit for him.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the stats, right? It was just the way he was playing,
Right.
the way he was impacting the game on both ends of the floor. I mean, even seasoned veterans like Chris Paul were saying, a player like Wembanyama, you can't replace him.
Exactly.
You got to have a whole committee to even try to fill that gap.
You got to have a team effort, for sure.
But before we even get into all that, let's talk about what actually happened here.
Right.
I mean, a blood clot. That's got to be serious.
Yeah, absolutely. So deep vein thrombosis, DVT for short, it's basically a blood clot that forms in a deep vein. And in this case with Wembanyama, it's in his shoulder. The biggest danger here is, if that clot breaks loose and travels to the lungs, that can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
So it needs to be managed very carefully with, medication, monitoring, all that good stuff.
So for an athlete like Wembanyama, he's so explosive. His stamina is incredible.
Right.
How could this DVT affect his game, even if, he recovers?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Because even after the clot is treated, there can be long-term effects. It can impact his range of motion, his endurance, even his confidence on the court, right? We've seen it happen. Blood clots have derailed careers. And I think a good example of that is, Chris Bosh, who
Yeah.
had to, unfortunately retire early because of blood clot issues.
You mentioned Chris Bosh, but haven't there been other players in the NBA that have, been able to come back after dealing with blood clots?
There have been, yes, but every case is different. Bosch's case was particularly complex. I think the main point is it's still too early to say what the long-term implications are going to be for Wembanyama.
Yeah.
We have to see how he responds to the treatment, how his body recovers.
Okay, so the immediate focus obviously is on Wembanyama's health.
Right,
But we also have to talk about what this means for the Spurs for the rest of this season.
right.
What does this mean for their playoff hopes? How do they even begin to fill that massive void that's been left by Wembanyama? I know Chris Paul had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, and Chris Paul's right. You cannot replace a player like Wembanyama. I mean, he was the heart and soul of this team. And, the Spurs were already facing a tough challenge in the Western Conference, and now this has just made their road that much tougher.
So what are their options right now? I mean, can they make some strategic adjustments to stay competitive? Or are we looking at a lost season here?
Well, I mean, Coach Popovich, he's a brilliant coach.
Right.
So, he's working on adjustments, but, they're going to need other players to step up big time.
Right.
Guys like Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, they're going to have to carry a much heavier load now. But it's not just about scoring points. It's about, replicating that defensive presence that Wembanyama brought, his ability to control the paint,
Right.
his impact on the game.
Yeah. I hear you saying it's a team effort,
It's got to be.
but some analysts are saying that the Spurs might have to make a trade to
Yeah.
stay competitive. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
The trade deadline is coming up, and if the Spurs decide to be aggressive, they could go out and look for a player who can, at least try to fill that void.
Right.
But, finding a player of Wembanyama's caliber, that's next to impossible.
Yeah.
It's a tough market out there.
Yeah, it sounds like this is also a huge mental challenge for the Spurs.
Oh, for sure.
It's a young team. They lose their star player.
Right.
I mean, that could be really demoralizing.
Absolutely. And this is where, Coach Popovich's leadership is going to be, I think, more important than ever.
Yeah.
He needs to keep this team focused, keep them believing in themselves, and find a way to keep them motivated through what is going to be a really tough stretch.
So, we've talked about the physical side of things, the impact on the team.
Right.
But, the biggest question really is Wembanyama's future.
Yes.
So we talked about the potential long-term effects, but what about, his mental state? Coming back from an injury like this,
Yeah.
especially at such a young age, and, this is a crucial point in his career.
Yeah, it's got to take a toll on him.
It has to.
This is a young man who had the weight of, expectations on his shoulders.
Right?
And now he's dealing with this, major setback. And, the Spurs, they have a great support system.
Yep.
And they're going to have to really rally around him, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
The coming weeks and months are going to be crucial for his recovery, not just physically, but mentally as well.
Man, there's a lot to process here.
Yeah.
You have a young star season cut short, a team playoff hopes hanging in the balance, and a whole
Yeah.
lot of uncertainty about the future. It really is a reminder that, in professional sports, things can change like that.
Oh, yeah, in a snap.
There's still a lot we don't know about how severe this is for Wembanyama and how it will impact his recovery. But, one thing's for sure. This is a situation that deserves, all of our attention and concern.
Absolutely. We just all got to hope for the best for Victor.
Right.
He has the potential to be one of the all-time greats. And I
Yeah.
think, we all want to see him back on the court, healthy, dominating. Like, we know he can.
So for everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What are your predictions for Wembanyama's career? How do you think this is going to shape the Spurs' future? Keep the conversation going. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
You too.